I can say gents today because there's no ladies. Actually, no, there is. So, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for coming today. Look, I'm Quett. My name's Quett. I'm the Oceania trainer for Olympus. I've been with the company for about 6 years now, so I'm slowly turning into part of the furniture there. But I'm excited to be here. Primarily because I'm actually from Brisbane, so it's nice to be back because I work out of our head office in Sydney. Alan that's Alan. He looks after the Queensland region. That's it. So I'm excited to be here because we're talking about our CSC cameras and also some of the philosophy behind our design principles and our new technologies, but also the fact that we're also talking about the new E-P5 today, which is actually getting its first public display today. So the good thing for you guys is that you guys are literally the first people in the country to have actually seen this camera. So that's pretty exciting. So I'm going to start things off by asking you guys a question. Okay, how many of you guys own an SLR? All you guys own an SLR. Okay. Now of you guys that own an SLR, how many of you guys take that SLR to your birthdays, your barbecues, your family events, all that sort of stuff? Oh, excellent. Hardly any of you. Now, interestingly enough, we at Olympus, when we looked at creating the pen system as such, that's something that we actually took into account when we were looking at the pen design and things like that. Interestingly enough, from our research, what we actually found was that what we did was we did a global survey of SLR owners, okay? And we asked them that very same question: do you take your SLR to those important family events, your barbecues, your parties, your dinner meetings, and all that sort of stuff? Actually, I'm going to throw the question out to you guys. What percentage of people do you think didn't take their SLRs to their birthdays, their barbecues, the parties and things like that? If you actually had a look around, you guys, and saw how many people put their hand up, that'll give you a rough starting area. 60%. 80? I'm sorry? 85. 85 to 90.
90.2.
90.2. Look, you were very, very close, and for that, you get a special pen bag, pen satchel. So, So 90% of people do not take their SLRs around with them. And look, at the end of the day, that's an issue. Because what it means is that I end up in crap photos of myself when I'm out and about, like this, right? Because I don't have a proper camera when people are taking photos and whatnot, and we're trying to avoid that, obviously. Okay? So that was one of the really important things for Olympus, in creating a camera that was really high performance in terms of image quality, but something that's small enough to literally carry around with you as such. Sorry, sir. I'm just using this. Alright, here we go. So, in terms of what we know through our research, people aren't prepared to lug around such a big, heavy unit in an SLR, but they still want the high performance from something like that. And then what we're also finding is that people are individuals, and so they want products that suit their own individual lifestyles. And that's actually really important about our pen series, from our entry level all the way up to our top of the range with the E-P5 and the OMD cameras, is that there actually is a lifestyle that's associated with each said camera as such. So say, for example, with our EPM2 here, this is our entry-level unit. This was designed for someone that was just upgrading from a point-and-shoot camera. There's hardly any buttons on the back or anything like that. It's very, very simple to use. It functions the same way as a normal point-and-shoot. It wasn't necessarily designed for someone who, say, for example, is going to be mucking around with all your manual features and things like that, because that person isn't going to be using those sorts of features. Whereas, say, for example, our OMD users or our SLR users, want control at their fingertips. So custom function buttons, twin dials, all that sort of stuff. as well. So that's really important. So in terms of the key tenets of Olympus's decisions behind our product and marketing, first and foremost, portability. You have to be able to carry it around with you, otherwise, you're not going to be able to take a shot if you're not carrying it around with you. So very, very important there. But also really, really high imaging quality without sacrificing that portability. And then once again, we're trying to target our models to suit certain lifestyles and also value for money as well. So that's really, really important. Like, just for a bit of food for thought, here's a comparison of the smallest pen that we have. So that's the EPM2 versus the smallest SLR that you can actually buy on the market. So this is the Canon EOS 100D. Okay? So in terms of physical size, you can see that that's pretty big in comparison to these two units here. But in terms of performance, you're not sacrificing anything there. So you still got a very high resolution sensor. You've got high max ISO. You've actually got more focus points. You've got a higher frame rate, and it's about half the weight as well. Okay. Going on from that, if you're talking about a similarly performing SLR to something like our OMD, once again, we're talking about something that's a much smaller unit as such, but in terms of specifications, still stacks up really, really well against an SLR that is physically larger and also heavier as well. Thing is, 860 grams doesn't necessarily sound like much when you're first picking up a camera. Try walking around with it for a day or two when you're on holiday or something like that, and I can guarantee to you that your neck will be wishing that you had taken along a lighter camera with you at the time. So really, really important, that whole idea of portability, because at the end of the day, if it's more portable, it's more likely that you'll take it around with you. Okay, so really, really important for Olympus. Now, as far as image quality is concerned, what's really, really important is a combination of three things to get the best quality of photo possible. So first and foremost, you've got the sensor here itself. So you guys would be very well aware that with the OMD came a new generation of imaging sensors that we're utilizing, the 16 megapixel sensor itself. Now, if you actually read the reviews on a lot of review websites, magazines and stuff like that, one of the things that is a common theme as far as imaging quality is concerned is that to get the same imaging quality, same imaging output from another manufacturer, you would have to spend quite a fair bit more money as such. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in just a second. But also very important is the TruePic processor. Not only does your sensor have to evolve, but your processor has to evolve with it as well, because in terms of the amount of dynamic range that the sensor can physically capture, you need a processor that can actually handle the greater amounts of dynamic range as well. But in terms of things like your color fidelity, that's also very, very important, and also your noise performance, so your removal of your noise and your distortion. But then also, what's actually really important about our optical technologies is that a lot of the technologies that we use in our lenses are the same technologies that we actually utilize in our medical and our scientific equipment. Now, I don't know how much you guys know about Olympus as a business as such in terms of our entire company, but a lot of people are under the impression that the biggest portion of Olympus is actually made up of our camera business. That's actually not the case at all. Okay, our medical business is actually the most successful side of our company. So the optical business, so the camera business, actually only accommodates for about 20% of our entire turnover in our company globally. Okay? Our medical business actually contributes close to around 68% of that chunk. And then we've also got other sectors as well. So we've got our scientific and our industrial sectors as well. Interestingly enough, do you guys remember how you know the big planes, the A380s, the biggest plane that they've ever bloody built? At one stage, they were actually having some issues with finding hairline fractures and hairline cracks in the wings itself. Interestingly enough, I found out not too long ago is that when that happened, they actually needed to employ an imaging company to be able to identify where those cracks were and stuff like that. And I actually found out that Olympus were the only manufacturer in the world that actually had the technology to be able to actually identify the locations of those cracks itself. So we actually have a very healthy industrial business as well. So in terms of the imaging quality itself, a couple of things that's very, very important. Now, we did talk about the anti-aliasing filter earlier. So what's really important is that we've actually used the fine detail process, the weak anti-aliasing filter that we first found in our E5 SLR. It's been pulled, that technology's been pulled from the E5 and it's been put into our new pen series as well. Now, the TruePic 6 processor allows us to go to an ISO of 25600, and what that means is that, look, even at higher sensitivities, you're still going to get a really good, clean result in poorer lighting situations as well. So really, really nice there. Now, from an imaging point of view, look, I just took a quote straight from DP Review when they reviewed the OMD. This is basically what they said in their conclusion. They said, if you want to get a better quality of photo than what the OMD is actually producing, well, then you don't have a choice but to step up to the bulk and the weight of a full-frame SLR, which is all well and good, except I've just told you that people don't take their SLRs around with them. So it's kind of a bit counterproductive as such, because yes, at the end of the day, you will take the camera which is more convenient to take around with you. As such. So really, really nice there. But the thing is, that sensor that we use in the OMD is the same sensor that we use across our whole range of our current pens. So the EPM2, the EPL5, and the new EP5 utilize that same 16 megapixel sensor. So you're still getting outstanding clarity across the range from our system. And where you're going to find really good benefits is in high contrasty situations. So like in this shot here that I took down in Rotorua, I'm literally pointing the camera at the sun. It is behind some clouds and such, but you're still getting really good detail in your shadow areas as well. Often what happens when you take a photo straight into a really, really bright light source, especially in the shadow areas, you lose a lot of the detail in those shadow areas. And the great thing about this 16 megapixel sensor is that you're still going to be able to pull really good detail from those shadow areas as well. So really good improvements there. Now let's talk about our lenses. This is our current range of lenses that you can get for the micro system as such. But interestingly enough, if you're talking about all the manufacturers that make lenses for this mount, there's actually now 63 lenses you can actually get for this mount as such. The two major manufacturers are Olympus and Panasonic. Panasonic make a good range of micro lenses as well. But you're starting to see Sigma starting to make lenses, Tamron are starting to make lenses as well. But you've even got the premium companies. So Schneider are now making lenses for it. Carl Zeiss is making cinema primes for these cameras as well. And speaking about cinema primes, interestingly enough, the OMD, the EP5, these are cameras that are starting to be used on a production level for things like movies. Do you guys know Mad Max? Okay, so they just finished shooting Mad Max 4, okay? They actually utilized the OMD in a number of scenes to actually film a number of those scenes in said movie. So that's pretty cool. There was a movie that came out a few years ago called The Cup, which was an Australian film about the Melbourne Cup. There were scenes that were actually filmed with our pen series of cameras, because what they actually found was that if you've got a car, like a ute, with this massive rig of a camera shooting in front of a horse at full gallop, the horse basically gets freaked out and runs some other direction. Okay? So what they ended up doing, they ended up actually just getting a pen, strapping it to a boom mic, and literally held it in front of the horse at full gallop whilst they were actually next to the horse in that car, and the horse didn't actually get scared when that actually happened. So definitely used on a professional level. But a couple of things that I get asked quite regularly. What makes the Olympus glass special? Now, who here owns Olympus glass already? It's not bad yet. Okay. And it's funny because one of the things that I get told a lot, from other from people that utilize, different brands of lenses and stuff like that, who have started using Olympus gear. One of the things that they constantly say is, I'm amazed at just how sharp your gear is for how little money I spend to buy said glass. So there's a couple of things that I want to talk about today. First things first is lens design itself. This is a few of the technologies that we put into our glass manufacturing process. So we have a factory in the Tatsuno province in Japan. So advanced optical design. We're talking about the fact that we can make dual spherical lens elements in a cost-effective manner. Dual spherical lenses are actually quite difficult to manufacture because the margin for error isn't very large at all. In fact, it's absolutely tiny. And I will talk about margin for error in just a second. We've also got new coatings that we're putting on our lenses as well. So what we call our zero coating. So it stands for Zuko Extra Low Reflection or optical coating. What that essentially means is that, say for example, that photo that I showed you before of when I was shooting in Rotorua, especially when you're shooting into bright light sources, you don't get any signs of things like flaring and stuff like that. If we go back to that shot that I took, essentially there's no hint of any flaring or anything like that, even though I'm pointing the camera at a really, really bright light source. So that's the optical coating doing its bit there. But then also what's really important as well is our movie and still compatible lenses. What it essentially means is that your lens is going to be silent when you're focusing in both stills and video, but it's also going to be focusing very, very quickly as well. Okay, now that's really important with our pen series and our OMD series because as far as focusing speeds are concerned, across the board, all of our cameras are currently the fastest focusing cameras on the market. There are multi-$1,000 SLRs that don't focus as fast as our pens and our OMD cameras, which is quite extraordinary. So that's really cool there. Now let's talk about miniaturization. Like I said before, we take a lot of our technology from our scientific and our medical divisions to the extent where the actual same elements that we use in, say, for example, our microscope lenses just happen to be similar elements that we utilize in, say, for example, our macro lenses and things like that as well. Obviously, with things like microscope lenses, they have to be of a very, very high quality to get the precision that you need. So really important there. Like one of the most amazing things that Olympus actually produced back in 2006 was something called an endocapsule, where basically it was the size of a pill. It literally was the size of a pill, and a patient would swallow said pill, and that pill actually had an LED flash, and it actually took 20,000 photographs down the patient's digestive tract. Look, they would say in the hospital, what happened with that capsule would actually wirelessly transmit photos from the capsule to a computer that was nearby, and that actually really revolutionized the way that we did things like endoscopy. Just because, say for example, situations like young kids, they got really scared when you would put a camera down their throats and things like that. Imagine just how scared they would get. Whereas now, all they have to do is take a little pill and basically keep on going their everyday life. As such. So really, really important is that commitment to miniaturization. Now, let's talk about margin for error. Okay, so in terms of our best glass, so like say for example that 75mm that we utilize, right there that we're using, in terms of per pixel sharpness and in terms of optical sharpness itself, I had a chat to one of the guys that work in R&D as well as working in our like that. He has a lot of work, does a lot of work with the guys that do the glass manufacturing of our company. And he said to me, in terms of the lens elements itself, basically they give themselves this figure as a margin for error for each individual element that goes into a lens itself. So 1/10,000th of a millimeter. Now to put that in more real-world terms, that's roughly about a hair in the middle of the gavel. Okay. Basically, if there's more than that amount of distortion in the glass element, we actually never put that glass element into one of our production lenses. Okay, so the margin for error is very, very small, which is why Olympus, as a manufacturer of glass, has one of the fewest issues when it comes to quality control between lenses and batches and whatnot, because there is such little margin for error. So that's a bit about our glass manufacturing process. Let's talk about the EP5, because that's what you guys came to talk about. So, really, really important. What we have is a newly designed shutter mechanism for this particular camera. So this is actually now has a maximum shutter of 1/8000th of a second. Now this is actually quite unique because this is the first compact system camera. It's the only compact system camera which actually has a 1/8000th of a second maximum shutter speed as well. So look, the simple scenario is allowing you to use bright lenses in brighter scenarios as such. You know, one of the things that I wished at the time of when the OMD was that I could utilize one of our 1.8 lenses at 1.8 outdoors. But I didn't necessarily have the ability to do that unless I placed things like neutral density filters on the front of the camera. So the really nice thing about the EP5 is that it does have that higher maximum shutter speed, but on top of that, what you also have the ability to do is select a new ISO, which is referred to as ISO low. It's the equivalent of ISO 100. So as far as an improvement is concerned, you actually get the control of 2 extra stops of light in the new EP5. So that's a really nice improvement there. So just to give you guys a bit of an example, so say for example with the OMD, with the minimum ISO of 200, what you'd have to do is literally stop your lens down to stem the amount of light that's coming into your shot at the maximum shutter speed. But now with the EP5, what you can essentially do is get that nice background blur in your photograph, even in brighter lighting situations.
Your ISO low.
Yep.
What's that equivalent to?
So it's the equivalent of a 100. Yeah, that's it. That's it. Now, what's very new is this viewfinder itself, so the VF4. Has everyone had a chance to have a look through the VF4? Have you had a chance to look through the VF4, mate? Oh, okay, no worries at all. So what's really important is a couple of things. First and foremost, it's the biggest viewfinder that you can get from any manufacturer as far as digital viewfinders are concerned. And as far as the entire camera market is concerned, there's actually only one SLR on the market which actually has a larger viewfinder, except said SLR is $7,000 body alone. so go team. So look, in terms of the improvements over the VF2, there's been a resolution increase from 1.4 million pixels to 2.4 million pixels, and there's also been an increase in the magnification as well. So in terms of physical field of view, it's quite a fair bit larger. But to give you guys a bit of food for thought, this blue outline here represents the size of the viewfinder that you would actually find in the VF4 itself, and you can actually see that these are other manufacturers' sizes of viewfinder. So like I said before, we're running up a 0.72 magnification in your 35mm terms as far as your viewing size is concerned. There's only one SLR which is actually bigger on the market at the moment, and that is the Canon 1DX. Like I said before, all well and good if you've got $7,000 to spend on an SLR, go for it. But the great thing about that is that that's going to give you a nice big view in that, and you're going to be able to do things like manual focusing a lot easier. You're going to be able to tell if what you're pointing the camera at is in focus or not. It's going to give you more accuracy from that point of view as well. And the VF4 is actually quite an advanced piece of optical technology, because we actually use dual spherical lens elements in the actual viewfinder itself. So not only are we using it for our lens design, but we're also using it for our viewfinder so that we can enlarge the view without adding distortion to the viewfinder itself. Now, another really important feature is the fact that this is the first camera that has built-in Wi-Fi as well. Now, from what we've seen on the market, a lot of Wi-Fi products, a lot of cameras that have Wi-Fi are only used as just a transference medium between the camera and, say, for example, your tablet, your phone, that sort of thing. We wanted to go a little bit further than that. So there's a couple of things that this particular camera does. One of the things you can do is actually take photos utilizing your actual smartphone without actually touching the camera itself. Okay. So that's one of the nice new features of it. It's also got a self-timer that you can define through the application, which is now available on the Apple App Store as well as the Google Play Store as well.
Olympus Share.
Yeah, Olympus Image Share. That's it. And so one of the things that you can also utilize is your phone's GPS to actually embed into the exit data where you were when you actually took a photograph as well. So that's one of the new features of the Wi-Fi module. Now, in terms of the technology of the EP5, one of the really nice things that it takes is the 5-axis image stabilization system from our OMD. Okay, and that was actually a little bit of a feat in itself, because in the OMD, one of the things, oh no, our OMD's on top of that camera. Okay, what you actually see on top of the OMD here is what would be traditionally called the pentaprism in an SLR. A lot of people said to us, why do you have a pentaprism in your camera if you don't actually have a pentaprism in your OMD? The answer to that is that actually housed the stabilization unit in the camera in the camera itself. Now, what we've managed to do is take something that used to reside in that hump and now resides in the EP5. So once again, miniaturization, we've managed to squeeze that into the EP5. So that's a really, really nice feature of the EP5. Also, what's important is the new IS mode. By default, if you're, say for example, panning, the camera will actually detect that you're panning, and it will actually disengage the appropriate axis so that it doesn't compensate for that movement as such. So it's actually quite a clever piece of